This video was sponsored by Babbel, the language learning app used by millions. More about them at the end of the video. So it's 1931, we're at the end of the very profitable prohibition era in New York, and at the time things were pretty lawless in the criminal underworld. There were all sorts of Italian gangs, Irish gangs, Jewish gangs, and it was complete chaos. Your Lucky Luciano, an up-and-coming mobster in New York's largest Italian gang or borgata headed by Giuseppe Masseria, also known as Joe the Boss. But unlike your archaic traditionalist boss, you're a part of a rising second generation of Italian mobsters that spoke English and were raised in America.
He was of Sicilian birth, Sicilian on both sides of his family, and you needed that in those days to make anywhere in the mafia. But at the same time, he was more Americanized.
You didn't care for silly things like only doing business with Italians or defending your pride and ego with your life. You just wanted to make some money and live the American dream.
He didn't care what your nationality was or what your religion was. If I can trust you and we can make money, we'll work together.
Lucky Luciano. What was his power? What was his talent? What kind of a man?
Luciano believed in money.
You were an entrepreneur first and a Sicilian second.
It wasn't that he was more violent than the other guys. It wasn't that he was more dangerous. Luciano was able to control his emotions and preserve equanimity when things got hot.
You saw the opportunity to make even more money by expanding the family's operations into new ventures like labor racketeering, gambling, and prostitution. But when you presented your ideas to Joe the Boss, he dismissed them, claiming that we were already making enough money with bootlegging, and your animosity towards him only grew. Joe the Boss was in the middle of raging the bloodiest mob war at the time against the second biggest Italian borgata headed by Salvatore Maranzano. It's been going on for nearly 2 years now, and sources say it left around 60 mobsters dead in the streets. That's 60 perfectly good, hard-working people that could have been making us money, but now they're dead, all because your boss was too power-hungry and caught up in his giant ego. So needless to say, you've grown a little disenchanted by all this violence. Prohibition was making us millions, and with so many other opportunities to make money in this great city, us killing each other was such a waste of time and attracted the wrong attention. And with no end in sight, if you don't do something to stop this war, law enforcement will definitely crack down on us, ruining business for everyone. But here's the problem, even if war were to end right now, with how unorganized all these gangs are, war will almost certainly break out again in the future, interfering with our bottom line. We need a way to organize this mess to avoid future conflicts within families and between families. If we had some kind of structure like this, not only would we have lasting peace in the mafia world, but we could all work together to most efficiently plunder the richest city and country in the world. So after some murders here and there, you single-handedly ended this war and created the Commission to do exactly that. A national board of directors or supreme courts of sorts made up of the biggest mafia families. The Commission decided who lives or dies and set the rules and standards for everyone to follow and settle disputes between families, but most importantly, you managed to bring together this group of complete psychopaths to work together in perfect, profitable, lasting harmony. And organized crime was born, skyrocketing the mafia into the greatest, most powerful criminal organization the US has ever seen. This is that story.
Luciano promised something truly revolutionary. He was going to literally organize crime.
Lucky said anything at all? Everybody listened, yeah. Yeah, Lucky, yeah. Lucky left, everybody laughed.
If you can apply the word genius to crime, Lucky Luciano was a genius.
This war that you found yourself in all started when your boss, Giuseppe Joe the Boss Masseria, got the brilliant idea that he would be able to declare himself the boss of bosses and all the other gangs would just submit to his rule. Big mistake.
Un capo, piccio, one boss.
When he started demanding payoffs as the boss of bosses from Salvatore Maranzano, the boss of the second biggest Italian borgata, Maranzano refused. So Joe the Boss sent hitmen to start picking off Maranzano's soldiers, and the Castello Marisi War was born. Fast forward 18 months later to today, you finally decide that you had enough of this war, and this is how you ended it. You went to Maranzano and made a deal behind your boss's back. I will kill Joe the Boss for you, you'll get to claim victory over this war, and in exchange you'll recognize me as your equal and the new boss of Joe's family. Maranzano accepted, so now it's time to do the hits. By now, both bosses have been completely on edge for the last 18 months, making them both very cautious and paranoid for their lives. So they drove around in armored cars with 1-inch thick bulletproof glass and had bodyguards around them 24/7. So if you're gonna kill your boss, you need to find a way to catch him off guard. His bodyguards also shared your frustration with the war, so getting them in on the scheme wasn't too hard. And on April 15th, 1931, you set up a fancy lobster lunch meeting with Joe the Boss at one of his favorite restaurants under the ruse that it was to brainstorm a way to kill his rival. But you and I both know that it's the exact opposite. You arrive at the restaurant early to set up the hit. Joe the Boss arrives in his armored car with 3 bodyguards, and before dessert arrived, you excuse yourself to use the restroom. Joe's bodyguards mysteriously vanish and 4 of your hitmen enter and riddle that old man with some good old-fashioned lead. When the police arrived, you had the convenient alibi that you were washing your hands in the restroom and saw none of it. And boom, the war was over. Maranzano was crowned the victor and recognized you as the boss, along with giving his blessing to 3 other big New York Mafia families. You were just relieved that we could finally start moving forward and make some progress. But getting promoted to the boss of the biggest crime family was also a nice touch too. But that hope was so short-lived when Maranzano decided to go back on his deal and make the same arrogant mistake that Joe the Boss did. He summoned all the major mafia leaders around the country and declared himself as the new boss of all bosses with many demands to follow. Maranzano forced all the families into the tight chain of command that the mafia would later be known for, with a boss or godfather at the top, an underboss below him that handled all the family's operations, with their underlings at the bottom that did all the dirty work, which were organized into crews, each crew consisting of a captain or capo and inducted soldiers. Maranzano also brought all the traditional rules of the Sicilian Mafia to America, like ultimate subservience to the godfather and their code of silence of Omerta. Seeing Maranzano betray you like this was the moment where you realized that you killed Joe the Boss only for an even more power-hungry and backwards-thinking old man to replace him. And as if it couldn't get any worse, a friend of yours in the Maranzano family found out that Maranzano marked you for a machine gun assassination just a mere 5 months after you handed him the throne on a silver platter. And if you don't act fast, you're gonna be lying next to your old boss. Now obviously, the only choice you have is to kill Maranzano. It's either you in a body bag or him. But just like Joe the Boss, you can bet that Maranzano is also armed to the teeth 24/7, especially with all the noise he's been making, so we need to find an opening. Conveniently, you were also tipped off that Maranzano was experiencing some tax troubles in his import-export business front. He was expecting some IRS agents to come and audit his books. So just to be safe, he ordered his bodyguards to be unarmed while the IRS agents were snooping around. This is your opening. So on September 10th, 1931, 5 months after killing Joe the Boss, a group of non-Italians you hired showed up at Maranzano's office posing as IRS agents. They whipped out their guns, got the drop on Maranzano's bodyguards, lined everyone up against the wall. Your insider friend Lucchese, who would later become another legendary mob boss, pointed out who Maranzano was. One of the hitmen directed him into his office, and after hearing a struggle and a string of gunfire, Maranzano lay dead, letting everyone know what will happen if they double-cross you. And within just 5 short months, you went from being entangled in an all-out war to being at the very top in peace. Now, one might expect that you killing a second boss would lead to another war, but for the most part, you won the war of public perception in the mafia community. Maranzano was clearly plotting your demise, so people easily accepted your self-defense claim. Even Maranzano's protege mafioso Joe Bonanno thought his boss wasn't with the times, and Bonanno believed that you killing his boss was the path to peace.
Your first hero
That's right.
was Salvatore
Maranzano.
Maranzano.
Yes.
And you letting him take over his boss's position was also a nice perk. Joe Bonanno would also later go down in history as another legendary boss. And on top of that, everyone was wondering who you were gonna off next, which didn't inspire much retaliation. Now you finally have the power and influence to cement the lasting peace you so desperately been craving. So you and Bonanno meet with 3 other big mafia families in New York and create a pact, a cartel where each family would get their own dedicated cities to rule over and to make sure that they crush all the other existing New York crime families at the time so they wouldn't have to put up with any pesky competition. These 5 crime families will later grow to dominate and completely control New York, and would later be known as simply the 5 families. Today, each of the 5 families are referred to by their most famous ruling godfather, Bonanno, Colombo, Gambino, Genovese, and Lucchese. But you have bigger plans than just keeping the peace in New York. You know that if any other wars broke out in the future in New York or elsewhere, the 5 families would be thrown into the same bucket by law enforcement and the public. So with the 5 families secure, you set up a national conference with Al Capone in Chicago with over 20 other mafia families around the country. And this is where the magic happens. You led the group to cement in a system that made sure everyone got their fair share of the profits, all the families avoided wars within and between different families, and to make sure that every family was structured for maximum efficiency. First, a lot of the ideas Maranzano forced on everyone were pretty backwards and irrelevant, but some of them were practical, like the strict structure of families with a boss, underboss, and crews to insulate upper management from getting prosecuted from the day-to-day crimes of those at the bottom, and Omerta, their code of silence. So you kept the good ideas, threw out the bad ones without letting your pride and emotions get in the way. One innovation was to add another role to the family structure, the consigliere. This was the family's expert advisor that acted as yet another defense mechanism to help settle disputes in and between families before things got bloody. Although you didn't care if the people you made money with were Italian or Jewish or Irish, the rest of the leaders weren't as progressive as you and viewed bloodlines as a great way to gauge if you can trust someone or not. So you all agreed that only Italians could be officially inducted into the mafia. How strict they were with this varied depending on the family. Some only allowed people with 100% Sicilian bloodlines to join, and others were more relaxed. Everyone also agreed to fix the size of each family so that there could only be so many official members, made men, in a family at a time. New made men could only be inducted after an existing made man passed away. This not only created an aura of extreme exclusivity and status for the mafia in the eyes of aspiring mobsters, becoming a made man became the ultimate rite of passage mafiosi dreamed about, but it also served as a great way to make sure that no family got too ambitious or too big, threatening other families. It also made families be extra careful in the selection process to only choose the very best team members. You also emphasized that being in the mafia was to be a lifetime commitment. There was no tiptoeing in this business. As you said, the only way out is in a box. But your greatest innovation that would cement your title as the father of organized crime was the creation of the commission. All disputes, someone wanting to put a hit on someone big, decisions, new rules would all come down to a vote, with each family having 1 vote. This meant that everyone was truly equal, and to go against the commission or any one family was to go to war against all the families at once. If the families played ball and stayed peaceful, they'll be guaranteed virtually no competition for the commission members. If they didn't play ball, they'll be crushed. And with the commission formed and the rules set, the American Mafia became custom designed from the ground up to efficiently plunder the US. And plunder they did. The creation of the commission in 1931 can be compared to something like the creation of the internet. Those that got on the internet flourished, and those who weren't a part of it perished, kinda like members of the commission. That's how revolutionary Lucky Luciano's idea was. He was a true visionary, a Steve Jobs or Elon Musk of the criminal underworld. And although everyone knew Luciano was practically the boss of all bosses, he didn't need to feed his ego and make the same mistake his old bosses made by formally declaring it. The commission would meet every 5 years, and the new structure would launch the mafia into a new period of unparalleled peace and prosperity that will last for decades to come. Prohibition gave this new generation of mobsters irreplaceable on-the-job experience of how to best organize people and resources, making them millions. And when Prohibition came to a sad end in 1933, they had more than enough bootlegging money to use as startup capital for more creative rackets. They went into bookmaking, loan sharking, prostitution, narcotics trafficking, robberies, cargo hijackings, the numbers game, and much more. With them united, the 5 families slowly but surely destroyed their Irish and Jewish competition as they tightened their grip on New York. They became experts at corrupting law enforcement, the press, judges, and anyone and everyone with power and influence. And Lucky Luciano got a cut of all that action, making him the most powerful mobster in all of New York. But no one is lucky forever, and Luciano's luck would soon run out. The rise of the ambitious Luciano also gave rise to an equally ambitious prosecutor named Thomas Dewey. Dewey was the Batman to the Joker of Luciano, an incorruptible, idealist prosecutor for the Justice Department hell-bent on taking down organized crime. And he was tasked with the challenge of prosecuting a new kind of criminal that the justice system had never dealt with before, the modern-day racketeer who never did any of the dirty work himself.
From the beginning, Dewey faced an almost hopeless job, clearing out gangsters and racketeers whose hold upon the city had been tightening through years of Tammany rule.
And after some clever legal maneuverings and discovering one of Lucky's rackets, a giant brothel network codenamed the Combine, Dewey raided 80 brothels at the same time and got 68 prostitutes and other workers to testify in exchange for better deals to testify that Lucky ran the place. Dewey's goal was to paint the prostitutes as poor, desperate victims of the Great Depression that Lucky took advantage of, and Luciano was sentenced to 30 to 50 years in prison. Ironically, Lucky getting thrown into prison was the ultimate test to see just how robust his concept of organized crime really was. The leader was stripped from the organization, thrown into prison, and yet business went on as usual. Lucky assigned someone to act as the acting boss, and the money kept flowing in as if nothing changed. Although Lucky continued to have the final say in matters and practically ran the prison, life for Luciano was a slow, gradual downhill fall from there. Once he was out of prison, Dewey got him deported back to Italy, and from that point on, although he tried, Lucky never got to see his beloved home of New York ever again, until he died of a heart attack at age 64 and was allowed to be buried in Queens, New York. Luciano was very innovative, but here's the thing. If he didn't know Italian, he would have gotten nowhere. The reason he was eventually able to get through to the more traditionalist bosses at the time was partly because they viewed him as part of their culture. He was full Sicilian and knew Italian. Today, things are different. People are more open to outsiders, but the fact remains. It is 1,000 times easier to influence someone if you are part of their culture, their tribe, if they view you as similar to them. Whether that be a mafia boss, the potential love of your life, business prospects, or a potential new employer. And a big part of that is speaking their language. This is where Babel comes in.
Buonasera.
Buonasera. Ha!
Buonasera.
I did it, guys. Babel is a language learning app that prepares you for situations that you'll actually encounter in real life in bite-sized 10 to 15 minute lessons available on any device. You can choose from 13 different languages, including Italian, and it has a 4.5-star rating from over 600,000 people on both the Google Play Store and the Apple Store. Babel is unique compared to other apps because just 21 hours on it is the equivalent to a whole semester at college at a fraction of the price. And after going through a few lessons myself, I can definitely see why. It's way more efficient than courses I've taken in school and a lot funner too. And for a limited time, Babel is offering you 50% off to further sweeten the deal. You can sign up right now with the link below and support the brands that help make this channel possible. Welcome to the Watch the End Club, and if you guys enjoyed this video and you haven't seen my first video on the Mafia called The Economics of the Mafia, people really enjoyed that one, so I will link it down below and on the end of this video on the end screen. A surprising amount of people asked for a video on the Yakuza, so I will probably make that in the very near future. Just make sure you're subscribed by clicking that red button below so you get more free video essays like this on the most provocative stuff in the world of business every single week. As always, you guys can let me know what other videos you want to see in the comments down below. If you want to support this channel financially, you can check out the video sponsor for today. You can follow me on Instagram at jaketrend.io. You guys have been very awesome. I've been Jake. I'll see you guys in the next one.
You know, when this slow night will fade away, and we go back to our old ways, two perfect strangers in the sky.